How's it going, everybody? In this video, we're going to pick up our video from the last video where we talked about the architecture that we are going to be deploying. We have the core switch at 3750, then we have our wireless controller, it's another 2504, and then I have a 3702 wireless access point. What we're going to be doing is bridging all this stuff together. So we're going to, the first thing we have to do when we go to set this stuff up is we have to configure the controller and the access point to be on the same network. We also have to make sure that the time between the access point and the controller is set appropriately. Now there's individual steps for each one of those, but the first thing that I want to go through and do is if we were to come in here on the access point, and if I was to do a show clock, it's telling me that it's 1993. Well, 1993 was a really long time ago. So I'm going to go ahead and do a clock set, and we're going to go ahead and say that the current time happens to be, I'm going to say 2100, because it is a little after 9 o'clock at night when I'm recording this video. And it is September, and we're going to say 16/2024. Okay? So now we updated the clock, we do a show clock now. Now it's 2100. If I come over here, I can't do that quite yet on the controller because I haven't bootstrapped the controller yet. So I have to still go through what would essentially be the initial configuration dialog. So if you've ever been on an iOS device, then that's essentially what this would be doing. And then behind here we have my Cisco switch that's joining these two devices together. They're literally plugged in to ports next to each other. So this is the controller, and we have the wireless access point is sitting right next to it. So we're going to be changing some things around as we go about doing that. Now, the one thing that we need to have in place though is we need to make sure that the access point can get an IP address. And what we're going to be doing is, and there's multiple ways that we can have our access points discover our controllers. One of the easiest ways to do that is to put the access point and the controller on the same subnet, and through the same process that DHCP works through, broadcast, the wireless access point will detect the controller. Now I'm going to go ahead and before I configure a DHCP scope for the access point to be able to pull in the IP address, first thing I have to do is I have to bootstrap the controller. So we're going to go through that process here. And right now I've only got one Ethernet cable connected from the controller to my local switch. And I did that on purpose. So we're going to go ahead and go full screen with this. I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way. Actually, I'm remote desktoped into a computer, so let me go ahead and jump out of the way and click back inside of here. We're going to come in here and we're going to say WLC 2 for wireless LAN controller 2. The administrative username is going to be admin, and I'm going to set the password to be password, capital P @SSW0RD, and repeat the process again. Just like that. Are you going to do link aggregation? No. Management IP address. This is one of those times where you'd have to pick an IP address, and I'm going to use the 172.31.42.2 IP for this particular device. The mask is going to be a /24 mask. Oops. So /24, and then the default router is going to be 172.31.42.1. And the management VLAN in this particular case will be 42, and we'll have to configure the connection, the trunk port that the wireless controller is connected to. The port, that switch port, will be configured as a trunk port here in just a second. I'll knock that config out, but we'll work on that one stage at a time here. So the port number we're going to be using is port number 1. That's going to be our management port, and DHCP server address is going to be 172.31.42.1. The virtual gateway IP is going to be 192.0.2.1. My multicast address is going to be 239.1.1.1. My mobility group name is going to be MOB GRP1. My SSID is going to be SSID1. Am I going to do any DHCP bridging mode? I'm going to say no. Am I going to allow static IPs? No. Are we going to configure a radius server? No. My country code. So what? Where are my wireless controller, wireless access points going to sit? They are going to be US based. Am I going to enable 802.11b? Yep. A? Yep. And G? Sure, why not? Am I going to do auto RF? No, we're not going to do auto RF. Configure an NTP server now? I'm going to say nope. And set the system time now? Yes. The month day format is going to be, it is September, and it's 16, 2024. Oh, my mistake. So it's going to be, oh, that's right. I need to go 09, 16, 24. The hour, minute, second, so it's going to be 21:00:00. Would you like to configure IPv6 parameters? Nah, that's okay. Is this information correct? Yes, it is. So it's going to go ahead and get that basic configuration in place. And while that is working, I'm going to go ahead and pull out my switch. And we can see this port right here, 15 is my wireless controller port. So I'm going to do a show run interface gig 10/15, and right now it is a .1Q trunk. So I'm going to go to interface gig 10/15, and I'm going to type in description is going to be WLC 2, the switch port trunk encapsulation .1Q, the switch port trunk native VLAN is going to be 42 because we needed that to be native because it's going to be for management purposes. We're going to switch port trunks, switch port spanning tree, port fast edge. So yeah, so all that should be fine. Do show run interface gig 10/15. All that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and save that config. Now we're just waiting for the wireless controller to do its thing. Now, I have to be a little careful here when it comes to the DHCP scope because now I've got the controller up and running. Well, it's booting up right now. So I'll go ahead and let you guys see what that looks like behind the scenes. There's not a lot to it, but these controllers aren't super fast either. I've got another 2504 that I've got deployed in a lag so that I could test out both variations and get it up and running, all that capability squared away. All those pieces are fairly straightforward to go do. So once we get that all situated and squared away, then once this guy is done booting, then we'll be able to connect to the controller via the web page. And then once we have the web page accessible, then we're going to go ahead and we will configure the DHCP scope so that the access point can do its thing. There's another thing that we have to go do on the controller, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this guy up here. This is I need to pull up the access point, and let me go ahead and scoot this over here. So one of the things we have to do on the access point is there's a certificate exchange process that happens. The controller and the access point both go through a certificate exchange process when they're doing their thing. And one of the things that needs to happen is that the access point certificate needs to be valid. So if we do a show crypto PKI and we look at the certificates, there's going to be a lot of information. So we are looking for the MIC, the machine install or manufacturer installed certificate. So what we're trying to do here, let me go ahead and get out of the way and blow this up here. What we are looking for is the validity date of when this certificate should be good to go. And so we're going to have to be, this might actually be one, manufacturing, this might be one. So it's a general purpose. It's good until 2027. Yeah, here's the mixer right there. So 2027. So it's still solid for the date that I've got here for it. So that's what we need to be paying attention to, is when the certificate would be no longer valid. It's a 10-year long certificate. So once the controller is up, and the controller is up now, so I'm going to go ahead and type in admin and then the password. So now I have CLI access to the controller. If I do a show system interfaces, I see that I have an IP address. If I do a show interface summary, I have the IP address configured. Now I don't have on the Cisco switch side, I don't have over here, I don't have him configured yet. So I'm going to type in do show IP interface brief. I don't have VLAN 42 ready to go yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create VLAN 42. I'm going to call this, the name is going to be WLC 1 network. And then I'm going to type in interface VLAN 42. IP address here is going to be 172.31.42.1/24. I'm going to no shut that. I'm going to exit out. And now that I've got this configured, and if I do a show interface trunk, we should see that on port 15, which is where our controller sits, I'm allowing all the VLANs to go across. Now we're just waiting for 42 to get added to this list right here. That's our next stage. And there it goes. So now if I was to go to the controller and if I was to ping and the IP address 172.31.42.1, hopefully that goes through. Okay, so I sent it, but I did not get a receive. So do show IP interface brief. 42 is up. So let's do a ping 172.31.42.2. So I've run into this problem in the past where the pings will die. We'll do a show ARP VLAN 42. It sees the MAC address coming across, and the last time I did this, I did it into a port channel, and I had no problems with it. So we'll see if that doesn't change. So we see it coming in, and if I do a show CDP neighbors, we see that on WLC 2 we have port 15. If we do a show MAC address table dynamic for interface gig 10/15, we can see it coming across, which is what we want to see. And there's only one port attached, so that's the one we wanted to configure. So that's good to go. So while I'm waiting for that process to finish, and if we look at the show run interface gig 10/15, we have to have this native VLAN 42 created because we need to untag the configuration. So if we were to, I don't have the CLI pulled up, I'd have to SSH into my other controller, which I can do. That's actually pretty easy to do. Let me go ahead and describe that real quick. If we look at show, is it over here? Show run interface port channel, show IP interface brief, and port channel 2. So show run interface port. Actually, it's not a layer 3 port channel. So it is we do a show ether channel summary. 17 and 18 are both up. There's no protocol for it. There's no LACP negotiation between the two. So that's really mainly the main issue that we run into. So I'm actually surprised this is not responding. Usually it does pretty quickly. But that's not a showstopper. But I will fix that. That's not that big of a deal. But if I was to pull up, grab this, bring this over real quick. This is the 2504, the other 2504 that I'm referring to. We have one access point. We don't have any clients currently associated to it. But if I go to the controller and I look at the interfaces, we have, I've got the VLAN identifier is 40 in this particular case. So I am doing, if I look at the management, I am tagging, yeah, the VLAN identifier is 40. So that's how it's set up on this controller as well. So that is why I'm actually a little surprised that the ping isn't responding. So if and there's the understanding too that you potentially would have to flip it over to a access port in order for this to work. So let me go ahead and, so that would technically work too. The drawback to it though is that the idea of using the controller is this idea of a centralized switching model, meaning that if your access point it has a client associated to it, that traffic is actually backhauled from the access point through a LWAP tunnel back to the controller, and then from the controller it's dropped off onto the wired network. So in this particular case here, if I configure the port that the controller connects to the switch on as an access port, I'm only allowed one VLAN. That's technically okay for what I'm trying to demo here. But because of the fact that I'm looking at making this to be able to run multiple VLANs on it, I need to be able to take that traffic that's coming from the access point that might be on one of many VLANs, deliver it via LWAP tunnel to the controller, and the controller will then, based off the VLAN that's received, would be able to then place it in the appropriate VLAN. If you don't have the access port configured, or if you have access port configured, you can't do that in the controller. So that's why it's a little like kind of a pain to deal with. So let's see if I can't ping it again. See if the ping responds. And it's still not liking that ping. So let me, while I'm waiting for that to figure itself out, I'm going to go ahead and create the DHCP pool. And I'm going to go ahead and go config T, IP DHCP pool, and it's going to be VLAN 42. And the other thing that I want to make sure of here is do show CDP neighbors. And I want to look at where 16 is configured. So do show interface status for port 16. Port 16 is currently VLAN 3. So on interface gig 1/16, I need to type in here switch port, mode of access, switch port access VLAN 42, spanning tree port fast edge. And I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that because I need to put in the same VLAN, same subnet as the controller. So I'm going to type in IP DHCP pool is VLAN 42. The network here is going to be 172.31.42. Actually, let me go ahead and put in the 172.30. The default router is going to be 172.31.42.1. The DNS server is going to be quad 8 because this will give us the opportunity to get on the internet with DNS. If we wanted to do the domain, like if I could come in here to put the domain name, if I was going to have the access point use DNS to look up the controller's IP address, which you could have done if you're running an actual DNS server. You could do that as well. And then I'm going to come in here and type an IP DHCP excluded address. It's going to be 172.31.42.1 through 172.31.42.10. So this guy should get the IP address of .11. We'll type in this command here. And it's going to be network of 172.31.42.0/24. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now with that being done, this guy gets an IP address on BVI1, so Bridge Virtual Interface 1, and what should end up happening is he's trying to reach out via Quad 8 to Cisco CapWAP controller. The access point will continuously try to go out and reach the controller through multiple methods. It's not going to stop at just one. The drawback to it is, though, is we still haven't gotten connectivity to the controller. That's the main thing. So if I go back over here and I try to ping this IP address, what you're going to end up getting into is a perpetual loop. So if the controller is not reachable by the access point, then it's going to go ahead and release its IP address on the BBI interface and then try to re-engage it through DHCP. So in the short term, if we do a show CDP neighbors, we know that WLC 2 is on port 15. So what I can do in the short term, just to try to get this to work, to show you what this looks like, is we can go through and type in interface gig 10/15 and do show run interface gig 10/15. And I can type in, pull these commands out here. Switch port mode of access, switch port mode, switch port access VLAN 42, and do show run interface gig 10/15. We're going to go ahead and pull this command out real quick. So now if I was to come back down here and try to ping that IP, you still don't want it to be configured this way, though. That's the main thing. Oh, you know why? It's not going to work because I have the VLAN ID flipped, so it's not going to allow that to happen. So if we were to go back underneath the interface, we need it to be configured to do trunking. So switch port. So I'm going to go ahead and say default interface gig 10/15, and I'm going to type in, it's going to be interface gig 10/15, switch port mode, switch port trunk and cap .1Q, switch port mode of trunk, switch port trunk native VLAN is 42, and do show in spanning tree port fast network and edge trunk. Do show run interface gig 10/15, and we're going to go ahead and do a show interface trunk to see if that 42 is allowed, and it is. We're going to reattempt the ping. This is the main thing right now, and I'm not exactly sure why it's giving me a hard time. Show IP interface brief. I did configure it correctly, right? Show run interface VLAN 42. Just making sure I haven't made any mistakes. Okay, so it's there. So as you can see, the access point itself is still consistently getting an IP address, and it's trying to use Google DNS to reach this particular DNS entry. There isn't one. Google's never going to respond with it. So that's where having the controller on the same subnet as the access point. So what I'm going to do in the short term is I'm going to see why this is not working and see if I can't fix the problem so that we can get this up and running. So I'm going to pause the video while I troubleshoot this problem to see what's going on with it. I did have problems with this the first few times that I did it, and I don't remember exactly what it is that I did to fix it. So in that particular case, it kind of stinks to have the problem that I do. But you know, we have to, the native VLAN is the key thing here. So if we do the show run interface gig 10/15, the native VLAN is necessary. But for the sake of troubleshooting purposes, I'm going to take it out. And see if that doesn't help me. Oh, and of course it fixes it immediately, ironically. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way again. And I'm going to type in that IP address, 172.31.42.2. It pulls up right away. I'm going to type in, let me go ahead and bring this over so you guys can see it. Type in admin and then the password. We're going to go ahead and save it. The code is new enough to show that controller. And so we can see that there's a controller trying to connect. Now, okay, and there it did. It did connect that time. So let me scroll back up here real quick. If I bring this up here, it did detect the controller right there. It gets DTLS connection. It was able to find the controller because we're on the same subnet, and everything looks pretty good. And that's because the time interval. So what's happening now is the access point is downloading the code from the controller so that it can pull down the config that it needs. So a little reboot. So we'll hang out here. I'll kind of talk through what's happening with that, and then we'll have an access point online here pretty soon. Once it downloads, it does take some time to do that. But if we look up here, one of the things that you'll see here in this little section is the last couple times that I did this, I had to turn off the certificate expiration issues. So the certificate would be expired. So you'd have to go in and set the time on the access point and the controller to be within the validity period of the manufacturer installed certificate, the MIC. And there is a way that you can turn off that check. And that's one of the things that I had to do, was I had to turn the check off and put myself in a time frame that would be acceptable by the certificate. So now I'm just waiting for the AP to download the operating system from the controller, and then once that's done, we'll be able to go to the next stage, which is pulling up the controller. So this is a slightly older version of code than what I have. So there's 5 access points supported. We have port 1, and we're just waiting for that process to happen. It does take some time, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause the video until that's done, and then once it's done, then we'll be able to flip over and do some basic capabilities along that process. All right, so we're now in the booting stage. So when you see, this is a common thing to pay attention to as well. When you see exclamation points, that means data copy, right? You're downloading something like an operating system. When you see pound signs, that means that there's a boot process going on and you're loading it. So right now we're loading the lightweight access point code onto this lightweight access point so that we can get the access point to be connected to the controller. So now one thing that's pretty cool about this whole process is there's multiple ways that you can associate an AP to a controller. I just happened to choose one of the easiest ways to do it because it makes the most sense to do it that way. So in this particular case here, are there, you can do through DHCP, you can do it through UDP protocol forwarding, you can do it through DNS. There's all kinds of different ways. So as I study through my CCDE and I go through the wireless section, this is one of the things that I've spent not a ton of time on, but enough to be comfortable with the process. So minus the native VLAN, obviously, right? So we all run into small problems here and there. But now what's going to end up happening is the AP is going to now reach back out to the controller to try to rejoin, because it downloaded a new version of code and then went through an upgrade process. So this is all straight up like one of the second or third times that I'm doing this. So I wanted to go through it in almost in a raw state so you guys would see all the steps that go into it. So now sometimes what will end up happening is the mixed certificate that you see right here, it'll be expired or what have you, and then there's a couple of config commands that you're able to type in on the controller to say it doesn't matter what the certificate's validity period is on the AP, just go ahead and let it join anyway. So alright, so it looks like we're pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and pull up Chrome again, and there we go. We have one access point associated. If we come over here to access points and we look at statistics, we look at AP join, we have a join. We have this AP right here, AP 4001. This is the MAC address. It's joined 172.31.42.17. 16 did connect, but then a code download took place and all that good stuff that goes along with it. So now that we have that, I can come over here to wireless, and I can come into here, and this is the actual access point itself. Okay, so we can see the version of code. The version of code the access point runs is the same version of code that the controller runs. So the controller, and you can download the code ahead of time, right? If you're going to do like high availability, or I'm sorry, not high availability, you can do, is it inventory? The general, you can, I forget exactly how you do it. Advanced. You can push the code, oh yeah, right here it is. So you can actually, if you upload a newer version of code to your controller and you want to pre-stage the code on the access point during the day, right? You can, and then we're just reboot with the access point after hours when there's nobody on the controllers or on the APs. You can then do that and then reboot the APs, and then the APs will reboot with the same version of code the controller's running. All that good stuff that goes along with that. So we have the country code is US. We're not messing with anything else in terms of what's here. There's a lot we could do, right? And truth be told, I've only taken this so far in my wireless studies. I'm still pretty new to it, but it's one of the things that I've played around with enough of to have a general idea of what's going on. So we come back over here to the general tab. I'm going to change this guy to be, the AP name is going to be, and let's go ahead and I'm going to say WLC 2 AP 1, just so that I can keep them together. I'm going to go click on apply. Yep, that's fine. There's no clients associated to it because there's no SSIDs deployed. I'm going to go ahead and save configuration. So that'll take a second. And then what I'm going to do is on here, I'm going to come back over here to the AP, I'm going to hit the enter key, and I'm going to log in. It's going to be capital C ISCO, capital C ISCO, and there it is, WLC 2 AP1. I renamed the access point just that fast. So, but there's no wireless configured yet. There's no SSID. There's no nothing. So all the steps that I've gone through up to this point are just to get the access point and the switch and the controller to talk to each other. That's it. I've just associated an AP to a controller. One of like 8 different ways that you can, well, not quite 8, it's like 6. So what I'm going to do in the next video is I'm going to go ahead and walk you guys through how to create a SSID on the controller, so we can get devices online, the DHCP scopes, all that type of stuff that goes along with it. It's quite a bit of steps, but once you have the AP associated to the controller, it's pretty straightforward. And just about everything that you can do in this on the GUI, you can do in the controller. So if I was to jump out of the way here and type in admin and then the password, I could do a show AP summary, and it's going to show me the AP that's connected to it, right? So there's a lot of cool stuff that goes into this stuff that you can go through and understand the processes that go along with it and things like that. So pretty cool stuff overall. I've actually been enjoying the process of learning how to do all this stuff, so that when I want to go through, and now mind you, I'm keeping it very, very simple, like pre-shared keys, stuff like that. We'll be walking through some demos of. I haven't gone to the process of having a Windows server with Active Directory installed on it with DNS, DHCP. Haven't done all that stuff yet. I do have ICE deployed, but I haven't started integrating yet. But once all this stuff is done, that's the process that'll go through it. And the reason why I showed you guys how to do it in the order that I did was because you need to have all three really ready to go at the same point in time. So that's basically where we're at with that. So in the next video, I'm going to walk you guys through how to configure a DHCP scope for your users, how to configure the SSID on the access point that the devices will actually connect to. And so on this particular PC here, if I right click here and go to Open Networking and Settings, and I look at my Wi-Fi and I show available networks, this one right here, WLAN VLAN 35, happens to be an SSID that's running on my other controller, and I can show you that. If I pull this guy over here, bring this guy over, and I go to wireless, and I go to, WLANs. Here, I've got this particular WLAN configured, WLAN VLAN 35, and it's currently secured with a pre-shared key. So I can connect to this particular WLAN that's associated, that's created by that controller. And that's really the power of the controller. So we're going to be doing the exact same thing on WLC 2 with the different AP and seeing exactly how that process comes across. It's fairly straightforward, right? There's not a ton that you really need to be worried about it, but it's one of those things where as you're going through the process, there's a lot of stuff that you can do. Most of it is going to be on the advanced capabilities, 802.1x authentication mechanisms, radio resource management, so on and so forth. So if you guys have any questions about anything, please leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll catch all of you guys in the next video.